Hi everybody, this is Suzanne in Ohio. We are back with the next stage of our bird kit. Today we're going to baste him to the foundation, and then we're going to cut out some fabric and actually start with the fabric collage technique. I'm going to go over the basting with you and the tracing and cutting, and then we're going to apply some pieces of fabric right here on this little bird, and you'll see how I go about that. So this is the third video about the bird kit and the stages to creating a fabric collage. And in the last video, what we went over was adding extra color to the image. I added extra color over top of the printed bird, and I brightened up his yellow. I did not darken down the black because I kind of, in my mind, I'm going to put fabric on that or lace, and then I will add darkness with stitches, probably. If you missed the first and second video about this, the bird kits for fabric collage, or you can use the same image for enhanced embroidery. So whatever you want to do with it. But the first thing we're going to do is baste. And again, what I do is I have a thin piece of Pellon in the back. I have a piece of felt in this case, and if you don't want him that thick and puffy, you can trade that one out for a piece of muslin, and then of course the finer muslin that that our image is printed on. This kit includes it as you see it, but you can switch it out depending on what you're going to do with your image. All right, so basting for me is really important in a small item like this that I'm going to be working on, because I'm either going to be fabric collaging it, which I will follow up with some stitches on top of that, or I'm going to use it as a colored embroidery. Either way, I'm going to be taking this piece of fabric and scrunching it up and moving it around, and if it's not basted, I think, for me, if I don't baste it correctly, it will scoot and the fabric will stretch and you can end up with problems. So I'm going to show you what I do to make sure I don't run into later problems. And it's not just a matter of basting in and out with a running stitch. I want to put some tension on my stitches so that the three layers can't scoot back and forth. So what I do to start out, I don't even usually put a knot. I pull my thread almost to the end, and then I take a tight little loop right here. And then that acts like a knot. It won't stretch out of place. And there I go, my first stitch, I have a knot. I'm using a quilting thread, and it tends to knot pretty good if you're not careful. It is a stiffer thread, and I like to use that, but use anything you want, anything you have. But it's the way you put the stitches in that is the most important. So pull it so you still have a tail out, and then take another tight little stitch and pull it through. Now, when I'm basting, I'm going to switch this around because my angle of my hand. I want to stitch away from myself and move backwards. So I'm going to go in and out, and then I'm going to pull back this way. And it's the tension right here on these stitches that is going to do the work for you. And I'm just going to work around him a little bit so you can see. And the closer you get to the image, the better. I didn't start out that way for this camera angle, but I put it typically very close to the image. Let me show you one that I'm working on. I'm working on this tinted embroidery, and I tried to get right up close to edges where I'm going to be stitching. Now on something like this, there's no basting in the middle unless you want to put some there and then later take it out. So what I do is baste all the way around the outside image, and then the first thing I embroidery is something in the center. And typically I get that secured, so in this case I did the leaves, and that secured these layers together right here, here, and here. And the next thing I did was the wing. Just because I'm stitching all the way through the fabric, and that embroidery stitch acts like a basting stitch. But let's get back to this. We're going to put the needle in and out away from us, but our next stitch will be back here toward us. And let me just go through. I'll use up what thread I've got in the needle right now, and then I can finish basting him later. Now I'm working on 3 layers because I want him to be an applique. And I came up with this idea because of a piece that I showed in the first video. I had a bird on another piece of stitch work way back in the day, and I didn't like the way he looked, so I cut him out of there and repurposed him onto a new textile art piece. And again, if you're going to do this, especially if you're going to embroidery on him and you've switched out your felt to muslin, get right up close to him with your basting, and that will help a lot. So we'll just stop right there. You can see how it's done. Well, maybe I'll go one more around the tail. So I'm pushing the needle in and out away from me, but then my next stitch I'm coming back this way. So you can see the tension at every angle. And believe it or not, it keeps the fabric. I can't pull that fabric out askew when I do this kind of stitch. If I do a running stitch, it's easily out of kilter. And especially the bigger piece you're working on, and the more you're going to handle it, the more you have to be careful with that. So we'll just cut this off of here right now. And that's my little advice for the basting part of it. So the next step is tracing. And I also showed this in the first video if you want to go back. In your kit you get a thin piece of Pellon type substance. It's not really the brand Pellon. And yours is even thinner than mine in your kit. And what this does, it allows you to lay this over different areas on the bird and trace off those shapes, and then you cut these out roughly and lay them on top of whatever fabric you've chosen for that area. All right. Now I realized here I got just a little ahead of myself. The first thing we want to do is to decide how we're going to block off the sections of our bird. Let me see where my papers are for that. All right. In your kit, you're going to get the printed piece of fabric. You can enhance the color yourself. You're going to get a grayscale, and you're going to get a line drawing. All of these. And I like to use this grayscale to decide how I want to block off the different sections of the bird. Now, here's the one caveat about this. You need to look at an actual image of a bird, and I suggest you go online and look at that as you decide what sections to block off. I've done this quite a bit myself, so I know how I want to block him off and divide up all this space into different sections, because I want to give myself an opportunity to use as many different pieces of fabric prints that I can, and that's going to make him far more interesting. So I'm going to do it from memory, but you pull up an image of a bird online and look at that while you're blocking this off. So what I wanted to show you is basically how I'll go about it. You can use pencil or you can use pen, a micron pen or a extremely sharp marker. And I just know that down here under his breast is a different shade. I want some highlights on his breast, but I want bright up here. Now, if you want to do something simple, put one whole piece of yellow and then add your shading and different things with it with your slow stitching. But I'll do him sort of the way my technique, sort of the way I'm used to doing it, but you can vary from that. So I know that down here, and I'll be able to see this line through my Pellon. Down here, he's going to have some shading. And use a little artistic flair right here and just mark that off in sort of a system of organic lines. And then right along here under his wing, I could put another section there because that's usually slightly a different color. And I'm going to see if I can bring my camera down just a little bit. This thing always gives me problems, but let's see if it will respond. Hold on just a minute. This is an old setup and an old unit, and I'm always trying to jimmy rig with the controls. Okay, so the breast I'll probably leave all as one piece, but since this is a tiny little space in there, what I'm going to do is mark that off and make the breast one piece, and then I'll come up here and I'm going to make his shoulder another piece, and then his head will be the final piece for me. Any more variation than that I want, I can add lace over top of my fabrics as I showed you in the first video, or I can add different texture to it with my slow stitching. So we've got our grayscale picture, and we're going to take this Pellon. I've already done his wing, tail, and his back wing, which is wing, tail, and back wing. And the black includes his little black shoulder bar. Now for writing on this Pellon to do your tracing, a ballpoint pen works best. So I'm going to trace, I'm going to be conservative with my Pellon here. Let's scoot this down. I'm going to trace this little section under his rump and lower chest. And I'm just going to write right on my Pellon, and nothing has to be exact. So I did a little squiggly line there, and I'll know where that goes. Now I can move this away from that a little bit because I'll want to rough cut and leave some of that Pellon on there before I lay it down on my fabric. So here's the next little section that I'm going to mark off. And I like to cut mine slightly bigger than what I'm seeing in the tracing. That way I can overlap these pieces. And if you don't overlap, some of your foundational coloring will show through. So that's totally fine as well. I'm going to move it just a smidge more. And I'm going to trace this breast section. Now, don't look for perfection. Don't expect too much of yourself. I'm telling you that even a, whoops, I went outside, can't see from this camera angle. even if you do kind of, I don't hate to use the word sloppy, but even if you do sort of do a sloppy um, piece, by the time you get it stitched and all together, it will be charming. Now, if you're not going to write the names on these pieces, just make sure you don't, once you cut them apart, that you don't flip them over and trace onto your fabric from the wrong side. Now, here's his head area, and what I'm going to do is trace the whole head and I'll tell you why. Because this little black face mask that he has, I'll cut that separate and lay it over top of the yellow. So if I go ahead and just make it whole under there, oh, that'll save a lot of work. Same thing with his beak. I will trace his beak, but I'm going to be laying it right over top of the piece of yellow. All right, believe it or not, that is our bird. So the first thing I'm going to do is decide which piece I need to lay down first. And because this is the rump, and these feather bars would slightly overlap that, and then I'll put this one, this one, this one, and you can number them if you want to keep in mind. So let's do that. Let's call this number 1, and I'll put number 1 over here on the pellon, and let's say number 2, 3, 3, and then it's time to lay this black bar section down. So we'll call that number 4, and I'll put it on my tracing pattern. And then this section will overlap this. So this is his upper yellow shoulder, and we'll call that 5. And 6, his head. And we have the tail, 7, and the back wing, 8. And there you go. So now comes the fun part, choosing the colors we want to put down with him, for him. So let's trim out number 1, and we're going to rough trim it. And I could not find my little special scissors for this. So I'm working with an old doll pair of scissors. Otherwise, all I had was great big shears, and I don't want that. So we have some colors here to choose from. And remember, if you don't have the perfect color, it doesn't matter. You can change the color slightly with your sewing stitches. But I know this is a dirty looking part of his body, so I'm going to cut that section, number 1, out of a gold fabric. I hope these scissors are going to allow me to do that. Now, let's get a straight pin. I can do a straight pin there. Sorry, I have to get one. All right. Typically, I just hold it with my thumb and cut it out, because it's on something like this, it doesn't have to be 100% precise anyway. So I'm going to cut both of these out at one time, remembering that I want an organic shape, but I don't have to follow that line perfectly. I just put that little scribble on there to remind myself that it needs to be more organic, more natural looking. And I'm just going to throw that aside, cut out the other side. And you can go in with a small set of scissors to reposition anything or fine-tune anything. So here we are back to our original bird, and oh, this is the exciting part when you get to put down the first piece of color. And boy, is it inspiring. So I like that right there. And I want to be sure and cover up some edges on the original drawing, because I don't want those little ink marks to show. And there's our first little piece of our collage. Now, how am I going to keep it there? You have 2 or 3 options. You can use a dot of school glue. You can use a glue stick. You could even use a little Fabri-Tac, although that's not as easily repositioned. So for today in this demonstration, I'm just going to use a little bit of glue. I don't want to glue absolutely everything, especially not the edges, because I might want to pick them up and slide something underneath them. So now we're on to what's next. And I couldn't leave everything within the camera, but I don't know, I just can't get it under there. Number 2 is this little section right here. And I'll cut this out, rough cut it, leave plenty of edges on it, because you don't want to cut right on the line. And let's pick out a piece of even brighter, but not my, where do I want to use my brightest? In this selection of fabric, I have my brightest. It's almost a yellow-orange. But I have several options here. And I want to get my values and my gradation just right. And that little section on his, right under his wing bars, is still kind of not the brightest part on him. Now I could do something really fun and use a print like this. Or this print. This would be big enough. And it's got little flowers on it. Let's do that for the fun of it. Now I hope I haven't lost my little pattern. Probably picked it up on the back of a piece. Yep, there it is. Okay, so I can just lay this on here. Be conservative with your fabric, because don't cut it right out of the middle of a piece, because you might need that for something else. You might want to recut even. And keep your scissor lines kind of organic. You can see I'm cutting outside. That way I've got some extra fabric to work with. I can always cut it away if I want to. Now in this case I've got to remove the pen because I got to get somewhere here. Okay. Now if you think that you want to use those same pattern pieces again, that's fine. But I would just retrace, get another piece of Pellon and retrace. Now I'm overlapping the black here a little bit because I know the black's going to lay over top of this. And I like the more organic cut on this, and I didn't put enough on that. So I'm going to go back over that edge and just wibble wobble my cut a little bit. And that will fit right there. So I'm going to put that down ever so lightly, and again, not along the edges. Okay, and you can see that piece of fabric that I put the first bit of glue on, that is glued enough to keep it in place for this process. So what's our next section? Our next section would be this front breast. And that is pretty bright on a goldfinch. So we'll rough cut that out and consider our brightest of brights. And that could even be this mottled piece. It could be, I even save things like this because sometimes I can just cut out where I had the right color. It could even be, look, this honeycomb print. That would be cute there. I wish I could hear you voting. Here's just a simple yellow. You know, I like that because it's the right value for his stomach. So I'm thinking I should do that. All right, so I'm going to put his front breast on there, put my pen in, and this is the edge right here that's going to matter because that is going to overlay this. And this is going to be tucked under the wing bar. So let's just get that cut out. And this has quite a bit of little organic movements in it. Now, the one edge that you do want to make sure you follow the pattern is the outside edge. But I cut on the outside of the line that I have traced. So in a minute way, like a 64th of an inch or more, I have enlarged the pattern ever so slightly. But this edge I know is going to tuck underneath the black. So I'm going to leave a little extra on that as the tuck under. Okay, and this will be his lower front breast. And again, like I said, the value looks right. And I want to be sure and overlap it. And I'm going to narrow that one peak down a little bit so that I can allow more of that little flowered fabric to show. So far, so good. All right. Now I've got a gap between here and where the wing bar is going to go, but I have a feeling the wing bar will float down over top of that. And I want to make sure again that I'm covering my outside drawing lines. And I like that position. So I'll just put a little bit of glue right on. Let's put a tiny bit on there just to keep it from running away from us. Okay, 3 pieces already established as to where they would go. And then the next most important thing will be this black wing bar. Now, what I've decided to do is make this out of 3 different pieces of black, and then I'm going to go back over it and with stitches or a piece of white fabric, put that on top. No way can you cut out this many little pieces and end up with anything manageable. So here's our wing bar section, and the back wing we have yet to cut out, and the tail we have yet to cut out. I'm going to lay that aside, and I'm going to cut out the tail first because it's the last one down here, and it will be tucked under. Now I have some different blacks here, and I'll show them to you. 3 of them are prints, and I just want to show you what you can do. This is a heavily flowered piece of dark navy blue, but if it were black, I wouldn't hesitate to cut and leave a little bit of the print on that fabric and put it down as this tail. It's those interesting things that will make your piece interesting. But what we have to work with right now is we've got this dark black with an ever so slight light green print in it, the yellow cherries and the red cherries, and any or all of them can be used. For this one, I think I'm going to go ahead and do a yellow cherry. I just think that would be so cute for his tail. And here's his tail piece. See, almost had it turned over wrong. So make sure you get it writing side up before you pin it to your fabric. In some types of collage, you're working with a reverse print, but not this. It's all face up. Solves a lot of problems. We'll get that out of the way, and then we'll finish cutting him out. And I'm going to leave a little bit at this end because I know it's going to tuck under the wing bar. Okay. Oh, that will look so cute. So I'm going to just turn over the tip, put a little glue on there. Flip this back, put a little glue right there on my piece. Okay. Now the back wing is what should go on next. Boy, am I making a mess here. And it's just a skinny little piece, so there's not a lot of print that's going to show. And it is toward the back of the bird, so I'm going to use this black that has a tiny light green print in it. Probably you can't even see that. And here's my pen. And remember, it's going to get tucked under on one certain edge. Have that figured out before you go cutting. Take the pin out. Okay. Piece number 8. And that will fit right here. And I've got a little fraying on this piece. And really, I don't care. Because this is more of a loose piece of art. And I'm going to be stitching and overlaying with lace probably. And that's his back wing section. Now his front wing section will overlap and fit right on top of all those. So for his main wing, what do I want? In this case, I want solid black. And then I'll come back with a piece of fabric of white and then finish out with white stitches. This piece of fabric's way too big. I should have cut it down. But let's get it pinned on here. And then I'll whack it out. Sorry, I keep pulling my arms to me so I can see what the heck I'm doing. And I'm just throwing everything around here. Can't remember what I did with my pens. Pins. Okay. Now, this part of the wing bar is going to overlap these already colored fabrics. So I'm going to cut along that edge, leaving it a smidge bigger than where I drew the tracing line. And then I'm curving right around into what comes up to be his black shoulder. and then I'll cut the other side. And that will be tucked under the next piece, which is yellow. And I do have something to say about that. Yellow is so much, or black is so much more dense colored than yellow. If you end up with a piece of fabric and your black edge shows through from behind, there's a couple things you can do. Can add a little piece of muslin, an extra piece of pellon under there, just anything to block it off. Or you can just not worry about it and cover it up and correct it with your overstitching. All right, there's our wing section and our black shoulder section. And that is going to fit right in here. And you won't believe how gorgeous he will look when he gets stitches over top of him. And that's about the right position for that right there. Very little of that black and green shows through, but it gives it interest. And we'll just put a little glue down to hold that in place. Okay. Now what did we mark off? We marked off an upper shoulder section. Yes, this little piece right here, which will be the brightest part of him in real life, and so you can make it anything you want. And also, I want to mention, you don't always have to use the right side of the fabric. If it looks better for your color combination, turn it over and use the back. And that looks pretty good. But I want the fun of taking him out of the ordinary, so I'm going to use the bright side. But if this was a more serious piece, and I want to be more true to life, I probably would use the back of that fabric. And again, pin this on and think about which section is going to show, which is going to overlap the black. It's this section, this bottom line right here. So I'm going to make sure I cut that a little bit organic, referring back to my grayscale drawing. I'll show you what I'm glancing at here. My grayscale drawing. I know that the bottom part of this section is going to overlap the black. So I want that cut very organic, and it doesn't really matter what I cut the top edge. So let's cut this. Let's do the organic side first. And if you're glancing at an actual photograph online or something, you can take a little liberty and over-exaggerate what you're seeing. And that gives your piece a lot of interest. Coming around that curve, I'm going to take the pin out. My scissors are sharper out at the tips. I'm a hairdresser by trade, and I save all my old hair cutting scissors for my craft room. I must have 10 pair. Boy, does it work out nice. Okay, here's our section for here. That's one of his. Oh, and that fabric covers the black just perfect. I'm not seeing any shadow coming through that. So just smear some glue right on there, making sure I line up here where it should be. And this little point, that piece of yellow, in case you want to get that detailed, it did come down in between the two wings. So that's why that's pointy there. There we go. Okay, so our next section would be that head section, and let's double check that to make sure we have all the voids covered. I'm going to extend that. I can see a little tiny spot where I need to just keep some extra fabric on there until I'm sure. I might end up cutting it away, but I might not. All right, now we're to the brightest part of this bird, and we can use something this bright. Is that the brightest one we have left? It might be, and that's okay. I could even repeat this one, which I just might do. Oh, I could. Or I could go back to one step backwards in a bright yellow. And then if I could use something modeled like this, which would be so interesting. And then if I decide to overlay some lace, let me show you what that would look like. If I overlay some lace, it takes the orange look to it, slightly backwards a little bit, and tones back that bright, bright orange. Now, this is a piece of batik, and let's see if I can even fit this pattern on here. I cannot. So if you end up with something like that, you can patch it, sort of. You cut out what you can, and then you take your little scraps and add to it. And I just might do that just to show you how it's done. And all we have left, folks, is our beak after we do this piece. And I do believe I'm going to do that. I love that orange on there, and I know I can dial it back a little bit. So let me finagle this onto here to get as much as I can. Oh yeah, that works great. And then all I have to do is add another piece right there. So what I'm going to do is draw a line right on my pattern, and I'm going to call that X, and I will cut out another piece shaped like that. So this is sticking to this fabric pretty good, so I don't really need to pin this. I'll just hold it and cut around. And I'll hold this. And this is my organic line right here, so I want to make sure okay. So this piece will fit right here. And then I will fill in this from the little X shape that I left on my pattern. And I can use, I think I'll go back, I'll use the scraps from that. If I have one big enough, do I? Oh my gosh, barely. I'll tell you what I can do. I can just use that corner, and what I'm going to do is put it underneath here. There, and overlap it. And that little sharp corner there, I'll just round him off. Oh, perfect. Don't you love it when things work out good? Now, that's edge of that fabric is kind of straight and not very organic, so I'm going to just curve it a little bit. And the second piece of batik that I put there just hooks up to that. Beautiful. Okay, that's great. I am so happy with that. So now to get it in place before we forget what the heck we're doing. And you know what? I believe, did I forget to trace his black cap? I did. I did. So we're going to lay that aside for a minute. I traced the beak, but I forgot the black cap. And there's a little bit of glue on there, but it doesn't matter. Now this black cap section, black face section, is going to lay on top of everything. So your organic edges have to match. So there, I trace that off, and I will cut that out of a solid piece of black. And I've got a teeniest little scrap here, and I can do it. No need in cutting into a big piece of fabric when you don't have to. So there it is. Just plenty of fabric there. And I'm going to go ahead and pretend like I'm cutting out the eye as well. If it works out fine, I'll use it. If it don't, I'll cut it off of there. And then I will stitch his eye in with slow stitching. And I'm coming around this little piece, which will be the top of his, or front of his face. And then I'm back here to an organic edge, which needs to be kind of wibbly wobbly. All right. We've got so much junk laying on him. So here's our little face cap and eye area. But the beak has to go on first, so I'll lay that aside and try not to forget where I laid it. Don't forget, Suzanne. And we're done with that piece. We've back to our headpiece now. The beak does lay over top of the head piece, so we'll go ahead and glue this on. And because he is kind of organic, the only thing that really matters here is the roundness of his head. Get the top part of his head in the right place. I don't like that. It wasn't where I had it before. I wonder if I flipped it over. No, that don't work. That's where it was. Because I wanted this little piece to come down and fill in right, gravitating right down into his breast. And there we have it. I have a little square corner right there I don't like, so I'm just going to cut it away. Okay, now the beak. And their beaks are not as bright yellow as their body, so I can use one of these pieces that I've already used, but turn it over and use the other side. Or I can use one of these soft yellows right here in this little novelty print. And I believe that's what I'll do because it's just the right shade. So let's cut some of this away so we don't have to fuss with it. Now, don't forget which part of his beak actually extends into his face. Have it in your mind or mark it somehow on your pattern, because when you lay it down, these are 4 sharp angles here and you don't want it to get you confused. But his beak will sit right there. You like him so far? I'm telling you, you will be so satisfied and so proud of yourself when you get this thing finished and stitched. And you can do loose, light stitching, or you can do a lot of slow stitching and really give him some pizzazz, whatever your style is. Now we're ready for our little black face cap section. And we have to remember which way it went because this fabric doesn't have a right or a wrong side. So did it go this way or did it go this way? And his black face comes right down onto the top edge of his beak. So it fits in there something like that. Make sure we get him. And if you're fumbly fingered like me, my age I am a lot, use a little straight pin like a stiletto to move things around. I need a little glue here. All right. And believe it or not, that is it for the basic part. Now, by the next video, what I will have done, we'll go over what about laying lace in enhancements on top of this image. And I'll show you how that will. You know, I need to be stitching on this before I see you again the next time. Let me just show you now something I had in mind. Oh, the wing bar, the white wing bar. So I found this weird little piece of print, you know, lots of little swirlies, and I thought that would be perfect for his wing bar, especially the big white section right there. So I'm going to rough cut something out and just see if I like it. And the reason it will look good is it's got texture. It's got both colors. It tends to say feathery to you, you know. Let me just cut a scrap off here. And I'll go by sight, cutting out a wing bar section. And what I'll do here is fold the fabric, cut both sides together. And I want that wibbly wobbly line. And I'll cut it bigger than I think I need it, because I can always cut it down. And you know, by the time you stitch over top of something too, it tends to get smaller. I mean, it looks smaller than you thought it would. So where does this, I can use the back side of this fabric, and then the black squigglies aren't as obvious, or I can use the front side. But where it goes, it starts right here under this first black loop and comes over and hooks into the yellow. So mine is way too big, and I said that I could cut it down. So I'm going to cut it down a little bit. And place that white wing bar right there. It's still bigger than the original. And I don't want it to overlap that yellow. So I'm going to cut off a little bit more. Not that it would matter or anybody's going to know the truly on a finch, or I'm sorry, yeah, goldfinch, where that wing bar is. But oh yes, I like that. So I'm going to go ahead and glue that down. Okay. Now the next question is, I'm going to go ahead. I know this video is getting long, but I want to show you this quick because we don't want to pick up right here when we come back. Want to show you how this works about putting lace over top of your images. And in some places you want a dense lace. Other places you want something that's finer, like that. This one has a beautiful texture to it. I've used this piece many times. So let's just cut out some scraps and see if we even like the look. And they can be organic, or you can use the patterns that you used before if you want to cover the whole thing. I just want you to get the right idea about how it looks if you do that. So a piece of lace on his head would give you sort of an illusion like that. Let me lift this up and see if you can see what it does for the colors and the fabric. It adds dimension, it tones back those colors, and I might just leave that on there. I'll cut this front little corner off just because I'm persnickety. And you don't have to cover absolutely everything. You can just enhance him where you want to, and I think I'll do that. And where else? A lace down here on his breast. And what a piece of lace can do is blend two sections of fabric together because it blurs the lines. And you don't quite know, you say, oh, where did that stop and start? Now, here's an interesting thing. In this old piece of lace, there's actually a leaf shape. So let's cut it out according to that leaf shape and lay that on there and see what that looks like. It might imply wings, feathers. So, well, that looks nice. We can move it around. We can put it up here on his breast, or we can use it as part of, oh, I like it better back here. It blends the rump and the lower breast, and it just gives you another tone of color plus the texture. So I'm going to put that right there. Now, when you get a bird kit from me, I have all my laces are hand dyed. I have in every colorway, and you will get pieces of lace. And really, you'll get enough fabric and lace. You could do 5 of these birds just off of one pattern. I think I'd like to see a piece of lace right here to kind of blend these sections on his body. But I would want something really thin. Oh, look at this one. This one has dense areas and not so dense areas. And look at these shapes in here. You could cut out those shapes and it would, well, let's do that. It would rest right across the top of where those sections meet and blur them together. Which shape do I want? I'm going to do that right there. Bear with me here while I cut this apart. And this is actually lace woven right onto netting. And there's a lot of shapes in here that is conducive to birds. So I'll make sure you get those kind of pieces in your kit. And straddled right across that section where those two meet, that is perfect. Oh, I'm going to glue that down. And look, it's a slightly lighter yellow, so it looks like a highlight. This bird's going to need very little stitching because he is just coming together perfect just all by himself. Okay, the only other place, if I had black lace, and I do not, but black lace tends to have different shades of black, and that would look good on here, but I don't have it, so I'm going to go back to my original plan and plan on putting some white embroidery floss on there to indicate those different feathers in both wing sections. And of course, this is his shoulder. I don't remember from the original photograph if it had highlights on it or not. I don't remember, but I could always look that up again. So by this stage of the game, you should be so proud of yourself. And isn't he just charming? And again, what are we going to do with him? I'm going to make an applique out of him. And I wanted a puffy applique because I will put him in a setting where that's appropriate. And again, the original, or as we work through this whole course, we're going to talk about what to do with him, how to do it, what kind of setting, how to make a background, how to add other elements to a textile piece. And he will be the focal center of attention. All right. Oh, it's been long, but fun. And I thank you for watching. And I hope you'll look for us on the next phase of what's coming up. By the time I see you again, I will have some of this stitched and my embroidery floss added to it. But I will also show you some of that in person. All right, thanks for watching. Susanna in Ohio saying goodbye to all you creators out there, and start sewing. All right, see you later. Bye.